benefit, but it doesn't lead to royalties. It's that kind of thing that we typically go through. We certainly could take into consideration looking at projects from a royalty perspective. We don't know. I don't have a clue right now as to how that would work out, but or what we would find. But we could certainly look at that. Since we haven't.
It sounds like we all acknowledge there's room for improvement at a minimum in this area. Still in the subject of sort of ratepayer benefits, I want to come back to the in-state versus out-of-state conversation with a slightly different perspective this go around. Not just where the money's going. Again, you give me that number where 90% plus is staying in the states, but the best way I can describe it is a comment from Senator Pavley during a hearing we had just this last Friday, where the subject matter was electric vehicle charging stations or electric vehicle, the infrastructure that's going to be necessary to accommodate the electric vehicles that you, among many, the Energy Commission among many, forecast to be on the roads in California over the next several years. Here's an example of California having been a leader, not just on pushing policies, but certainly signaling to the markets that there will be a market for electric vehicles, mandates that we have in the state, grants and other sort of incentives for not just the vehicles themselves, but for the infrastructure. And we turn right around and see that all the manufacturing is taking place elsewhere. So to what extent where are the ultimate jobs created? The comprehensive economic development benefits of the Energy Commission's investment through these grants and awards, how is that factored, quantified, measured into your considerations for how to award the money? A simpler way of putting it would have been jobs, jobs, jobs.
Mm-hmm. We have a couple of cases where a company was not located in California. They were funded for peer research. They ended up moving their facilities here to California. So that's some direct jobs. And in terms of trying to bring technologies to California, we do with our other ARRA funds. We are supporting manufacturing here in California, and that would include many of the types of things that we do in peer. So that's a different program, but that is a piece of the puzzle that we're looking at. Whether a company is going to come to California or not, because now we invest so little out of state, we're not sure that avenue would bring more benefits to California. But certainly to the extent that we have research going on and employing people in California, and to the extent that companies are able to move products, those companies employ people, and those products employ people.
I get that, but once we make that commercialization leap, while the research activity is done here, that's great. I think the biggest part of the economic development potential and the job creation potential comes after the research is said and done. And if that manufacturing activity or other activity was only made possible by the research breakthrough that we participated in, do we measure? Do we want to measure? How could we measure where that ultimate economic development benefit, separate and apart from royalties, job creation specifically is what's on my mind, is happening here in California in all, or at least in part, versus, well, the breakthrough was in California, that's great, it's a state of innovation, but we're going to manufacture in another state, or even worse, overseas.
Mm-hmm. Go ahead.
If I may, Senator, I think it's a great question, and I think I understand what you're after. I struggle, having done research on a worldwide basis, with just doing research in California. I think the numbers speak for themselves. We do most of it right here, and I think that meets your immediate concerns and interests. But the better question that you're asking is, how do we really build the private sector response to that research? How do we get it to be in California? That's a much more challenging thing for a public interest research group to fund to do. But don't forget, too, there's another investment. Even when we're out of state with that R&D effort, that technology can still often be developed in California. We're always after the best research. But I know that's a slightly different question, but I don't know how we can make more trees grow unless we plant more seeds, and that's certainly what we're doing with Peer in California. We're trying to attract companies to this state, and we've got the leaders. We've got the track record, I think, in other areas. I'm sorry, I should be more specific. In other technologies that go back a long way, and clean tech is now that sector that we're trying to grow here in California.
If I have been asking this question along the way, let me ask it at this point in time, and in the other categories of questioning or areas of questioning. Given all that, again, the legislature is going to be faced with the question next year of, do we extend or renew the program or not? And if we do, is it going to look the same, or how's it going to look different? In the area of ratepayer benefits and job creation specifically, could you give us any recommendations on, if we extend the program, how we should structure it differently or tweak the purpose of the program and the intended results and measuring success in a way that better reflects the ultimate economic development goals here?
That's a very good question. Looks like Ms. Jones is prepared to answer it. I think that's an excellent question. I'll defer.
Go ahead, Commissioner.
Let me bail you both out, or all three of you out. Why don't we chalk it up to, let us go back, think about it, have some conversations with stakeholders, and at the next hearing, come forward with some potential recommendations.
We'll be happy to do that.
Sound good? Okay.
That's certainly our goal. We want to see more of that. And how to better measure it, we'll have to think about it.
There's got to be a way.
Yep.
Let's go now to the process and some of the policies of how the research grants are awarded. Statute authorizes you to award grant funds using a variety of procedures. In some cases, it's a sealed competitive bid. In some cases, it's a competitive negotiation process. In some cases, it's a commission-issued interdepartmental master agreement. Say that 10 times real fast. Sometimes there's other sort of interagency agreements, and at times it's been sort of single source or sole source method. Is there a summary of the awards over the years? How many fall into which category? Is it sort of evenly spread, or are most of them in one or two types of awards versus the others, both by number of awards and by dollar value?
We have that information, and we can provide it to you. We don't have it on the tips of our tongues.
No, and we'd have to search through our database just to make sure we capture
But we have
it all.
the information to be able to generate that.
But you get the purpose of the question, right? If 90% were single source, that would raise a red flag.
Right.
So show me that if that is or if that's not the case.
It's 7 out of hundreds. It's a very small percentage that are sole source, and we can get you what the real
And
numbers
we
are.
have purposely tried to lessen that number, at least over the last 4 or 5 years.
And again, generally speaking, how do you decide when to deploy which mechanism?
We look at the particular project. In the rare case where it is one particular researcher or one particular company that is developing something that we believe has benefits for California, we will sometimes do a sole source. That's the kind of thing that is geared specifically towards a sole source. The other reason for sole source is if there's different phases of research, we might do one phase, decide it's successful or not, want to pursue a second phase, and so those are handled under sole sources. But the majority of our funds are now being competitively bid. So we go through the whole solicitation and selection process that's required by state contract law and policies.
Senator, I have a strong preference for competitive solicitations, and the vast majority of our contracts are done that way. I think we're moving more that direction. And when I say solicitations, I mean for the research. Competitive solicitations, I think, get us much better. Certainly, they get much better proposals, and we hope that we're picking the right ones to go forward.
So why not do them all that way?
I think there's good argument, and this comes up, I think, certainly in my experience as EPRI as well. A couple of thoughts that come to mind for why you might do a sole source. Well, certainly contracting is much easier with certain entities, and that's why we go with them for certain kind of work. But sometimes we know exactly where to go to get certain contracts done. So it's really more, I'd say, the ease of the process, and we don't need to go competitive. But the preference by far and the number of contracts we do by far in research is by competitive solicitation.
Let me give you a couple of examples of typical sole source contracts. We're partners in WestCarb. I don't know if you're familiar with it. It's a consortium of the western states that the Energy Commission is running for DOE. It's a $65 million DOE grant, a $95 million proposal to demonstrate carbon capture and sequestration. And we have partnerships that we have developed through Phase 1 and Phase 2. We want to continue working in complete Phase 2 and work through Phase 3, and we use the existing partners. It makes no sense to go out for a competitive bid with companies that would provide these services for Phase 2 that already provided similar ones in Phase 1, and similarly for Phase 3. So we fully expect to come to you. We have brought these sole source contracts to the legislature, and we will continue to bring them just to keep the team together and working. Another example is a utility. If we've canvassed the utilities to find out which one wants to do, say, a storage system, or which one's going to do a rebate on a particular technology, then we're required to come with a sole source contract because it's an electric utility, and we pick that one. They're the only ones interested. We could go out with a formal solicitation and take a few months to get it done, but it's just not really efficient. So we have certain requirements. We include patents. If somebody has a company has a patent on a particular thing that we're going to demonstrate, then we have to go with a sole source. We have no choice. So those are things we do. They're not things we seek. They're things we wind up with, and that's the best way to go.
And on those cases you're describing, that seems perfectly appropriate and legitimate. It's just our job to ask these questions if we're going to be trying to defend the program next year for renewal or extension. Sort of a counterexample, not a counterexample, but a different scenario is what we confronted earlier in the year with some of the ARA grants that were being awarded, not just out of state, but turned out to be sort of single source and a series of single source contracts with a particular entity that once upon a time somebody could argue, well, they have a unique expertise or unique experience in a certain area, whether it's energy research or efficiency implementation or whatever else. When this law was adopted in 1996, that could have been the case. Reviews in 2004, 2005, that could have still been the case. Here we are in 2010. Is that still the case? It's our job to ask those kinds of questions. Kind of to repeat something I mentioned earlier, the world has changed somewhat in the last 5 to 10 years with increasing awareness about climate change and evolving technologies and policies in place now that have incented certain markets. I got to believe there's more and more people getting into this general business of innovation in electricity, energy, etc. Are those unique players still unique players?
I think I would say that the unique players are a smaller proportion of the general research community. And so I think the fact that we have put more focus on competitive solicitations and less on sole source over the course of several years is reflective of that change out there in the research environment.
And so I look forward to the data about how many and what dollar values fall under each of the categories. But let me at least recognize here that I believe it was part of the Council on Science and Technology report in 2005 that states that this manual, we're coming back to the manual, so it's 2005. Here we are, 2010, and you have a draft of a manual. Should describe the orderly processes and procedures to be used to ensure transparency, fairness, and scientific and technical excellence using clearly specified evaluation criteria, rigorous peer review, and established metrics in a transparent evaluation process. It's been 5 years since we've been talking about this manual. So, sidestep.
No,
The short answer to the status of it is we have a draft, but
No, actually, the latest audit we did with finance suggested that we make a specific manual just for peer. In previous years, we have policies for contracts which apply to all the contracts that the Energy Commission does. And so we have been using and developing criteria. We have done what we can to implement the suggestions that were made at that time in 2005.
okay. And so the draft manual in front of you is the specific peer
Yes,
manual.
that's correct.
Do you want to add something, Commissioner?
No.
I saw you. Okay. Angling towards the microphone. So then let's go back for a second and share with me what you feel you should share with me in this conversation about the evolution of our contracting practices. What it might have been like in the early days from what you remember, what you've been told, and what changes and improvements have been made in recent years.
I think that we were doing more sole sources simply because we were trying to ramp up the program, and we were trying to continue research that had already been funded by the utilities and that would have been abandoned if we hadn't picked up funding. But over time, I think we've gotten better at our contracts. I should tell you that the Commission is doing a commission-wide assessment of our entire contracting process to see if there are any ways to improve the efficiency of it. So we continue to look for those. But I think the peer audit, the Department of Finance specifically called out that research is not the typical kind of contract that state policies and guidelines were developed for. It's not one, it's not the delivery of one service. It's not a product necessarily that you're getting. It's a phase of research. And so we have abided by all the rules and all the policies for contracting. But I will tell you it's gotten more difficult over the last few years. And we have much more internal review and our control agencies are a little more aggressive in terms of requiring us to do certain things that take more time, make it harder to do contracts. So I will make that statement.
In the early years, when the program was getting started, and I only know this because I've done some research since I got on, and I lived with some of the benefits and consequences of previous directors. The program relied a lot more on the basic ordering agreement that I spoke to your staff about some. That was one that had that high level of overhead rate that you mentioned early on. That, in our review, we're doing away with that. Part of the audit recommendations were to do away with so many master overarching agreements and focus on one or two that have some differences and lower overheads in particular. And that basic ordering agreement is not being used now except for closeout. We're just closing out existing research, and it will be over, defunct, and gone December 31st of this year. We're not using it anymore. And since then, we've turned to master research agreements. That master research agreement with UC is sunsetting, I think, at the end of next year. And the Department of General Services is working on new terms and conditions, so anything we enter after that would be under the new terms and conditions and reflect the negotiations that are going on.
Would you expect that from General Services?
Expect. Soon. I don't really have the ability to expect even when that will happen. I know it's ongoing. I'm going to look around and see if any hands jump up that anybody else knows.
I saw a couple of heads stuck down. But
No, they've been working on it now for, I believe, over a year, and I've been told by some parties who know something about the negotiations that they're getting close. It can't be too soon for me, but I'm just a program guy.
Okay. Well, again, whatever benefits that those new terms and conditions would provide, or as time goes by, we're going to realize less and less of them between now and the end of next year. But I would, at minimum, hope that that's something that we can consider in the later process next year.
In the meantime, we go directly to campuses if we have a specific need. If there's a certain research project that needs to be done, and we know where the expertise is, we can tap it directly without having to use one of these big overarching agreements.
Okay. So I'm just peeking back at your PowerPoint, the peer funding process A through Z, where you kind of outlined the various steps in how funding begins with an advisory board for advice and then goes through various iterations before contracts are approved by the commission or agreements are approved by the commission. And this flow chart, if you will, recognizes the various means for making awards, whether it's the competitive bid, negotiator process, interagency agreement. The same flow chart applies for all of them?
Yes, generally, yes.
Okay. And can you describe who, I see the CEC staff, at some point it comes to the commission as a whole, but there's an advisory board reference. Even at the advisory board, is that all CEC staff, or are there external players involved?
Our advisory board was called out by legislation in 2007, and it has members from the Public Utilities Committee, Air Resources Board. It has representatives from the Legislature 6. It has an environmental advocacy position and a public at large. So there's a broad variety of people that serve on that advisory board.
The public at large positions, are those appointments by somebody?
The commission, they're not appointed. The commission will do a search and identify particular individuals and then invite them to participate.
They tend to be researchers, they tend to be industry representatives, they tend to be who?
It's not. It's the makeup that I was describing before. It's more other agencies. We don't have a representative from UC, for instance, on the board. That was felt to be an appearance of some kind of self-dealing. So the researchers don't directly serve on our advisory board. They can provide input to particular projects. So.
In the decision-making of what kind of program or research area to pursue, to some of the more focus on, we may want to invest in this area, how would we structure a grant or an award program, to the drafting of the RFPs, or the RFP equivalents, to the evaluation of applications, to the recommendations of where the money ought to go, to the actual actions to formalize agreements and contracts. Is it all only governmental entities or representatives participating in those stages of the process, or is there any formal or informal participation or input from external sources?
The board, actually the board meetings are publicly noticed, and so anyone, including all the researchers, can have access to that, can come make comments, participate. So it is an open process.
Well, but for public comment, just like we're going to have public comment here today, is there any a role in the crafting of an RFP or the evaluation of proposals that's conducted by anybody other than CEC staff?
No, it's CEC staff.
Better not.
Ultimately, we're the ones who have to put together the solicitation, the selection criteria, the funding levels, and then we have the responsibility to evaluate those proposals.
So talk to me about who the Emerging Technologies Coordinating Council is and what role they play.
The Emerging Technologies Coordinating Council, ETCC, was created by the Public Utilities Commission. It's comprised of the IOUs and the Energy Commission, and the PUC, of course, to guide IOU investments in and technologies that might later be useful, that the PUC would support in terms of programs that the utility might want to put forward. Our favorite and a large part of this is associated with rebates. If the utility wants to do a rebate, there ought to be a technology that can support it. So we need to work together to make sure those are the right kinds of technologies. SMUD has since joined. It's not exclusive.
So who sits on this council?
The PUC, the Energy Commission, the 3 IOUs, and SMUD, I believe, are the ones who sit down. And it's geared for getting technologies into the marketplace and make sure we don't duplicate and overlap.
So they do give sort of input or advice in addition to the public comment aspect that you described during the hearings.
Yes.
Okay.
And we do, as Melissa noted, we try to get input from all kinds. We have public meetings, we have workshops, we go to conferences. We try to get all kinds of ideas for research that needs to be done. And once it comes to us, we score it. We don't let outsiders score or evaluate it. Sometimes we'll have technical experts who aren't part of the bidding process, who don't have solicited bids in. We'll ask for a technical expert to explain a particular technology that comes up. We don't quite understand it. We don't pretend to have complete knowledge on the staff. So we touch our technical experts around, and they'll come tell us about that technology. Then they go away. They don't even see the proposals. We just try to get their technical knowledge and incorporate that. And after that, it's inside and try to make the best judgment we can.
Okay. And you see, why we asked that question is if I have to face a taxpayer and justify this program and defend this program, one of the questions I anticipate is there any inappropriate involvement of, whether it's grant or award recipients or just industry interests in the policy making, the decision making of the Energy Commission and these awards and grants. The same concern would apply in reverse. If there's commissioners or anybody on the Energy Commission staff that has a role that they're playing externally with entities that may be competing for or applying for some of the awards, let alone getting some of the awards. Can you talk a little bit about what processes or procedures or policies you have in place to ensure that doesn't happen?
We have recently taken a look at our conflict of interest protocols, and what we had our attorneys research what other state agencies do in terms of conflict of interest. This is both to protect against direct financial interests, as well as things that might be considered to be inappropriate and appearance of conflict. We now have a set of protocols that we've distributed to our staff that we believe are the most stringent in state agencies, and they do address both material conflicts as well as appearance. And so if we have a situation, for example, where a staff is serving in some capacity with a particular group, say a member or a group of the Renewables Collaborative, that if there's any decisions or a proposal put in by that particular group, then under the protocols, we would look at whether staff should be disqualified, and we would take appropriate action once we've looked at each individual case and assimilated the facts. And so that's where we are with conflict of interest.
That's current or a proposed new policy?
It's a new policy that's already in effect.
Okay.
And I have our attorney here in case you have any questions on the conflict of interest.
That's good progress. Going back to the statute, I believe it provides that, quote, the scoring teams for reviewing applications, making awards, etc., may include persons not employed by the Commission as long as employees of the state constitute no less than 50% of the membership of the scoring team. A person participating on a scoring team may not have a conflict of interest with respect to the proposal before the scoring team. Assume you've lived up to that in the lifetime of Pierre thus far. How close to the 50% threshold have we danced around?
Typically, nowhere close. We normally have staff
Only.
staff only. Sometimes we'll have a member of another agency if we're working on something that closely fits in with what they're doing or they're going to be using it, then we will invite them to participate with us. But we're
You say typically, but can you cite any examples of where we even got to the 20, 30%?
below 50%? No.
The staff has to be at least 50%
At least.
or more.
And we're normally right at 100%.
Right.
I mean,
Okay. Have there been instances? I asked the opposite
More than
question.
that. I'll have to go
where it's
look.
dropped
We'd
down
have to look, but I'm not
80%.
aware of any.
Not aware.
I can't think of any.
Senator, and I share your concerns about protecting the public interest here, any conflict of interest, appearance of conflict of interest. I think the staff does an excellent job, and they are independent of commissioners, certainly this commissioner in terms of any selection process. I share your concern. I'm very interested in knowing or getting to the bottom of any impropriety around this.
It is, the statement of, no, it's typically 100% of CEC staff. Does that apply both to the Phase 1 and Phase 2 scoring? I know sometimes there's multiple phases of evaluating applications before a final decision is made. Or even
no,
the drafting of RFPs.
Sometimes we involve utilities where they're going to be if they're going to provide rebates or participate in that. Once the technologies come out, we will have the utilities advise us, and I believe in one solicitation we had them weed out ones that weren't going to be applicable in their service territories. I think I remember one of those, and a few of the proposals or the technologies didn't advance to the second round. But I'll have to let you know what the makeup of that first screening was.
Okay. Just in recognition of the time and wanting to force some public comment, let's want to begin to sort of wind today down, but just put out there for consumption and for preparation for the next hearing a couple of issue areas that will be next in this conversation. Among them, not just who decides how the awards are made, but the overall administration of the PEER program. Previous reports have suggested that the Commission consider two potential options for the future of PEER. One, where the Energy Commission continues to sort of administer, sort of top to bottom, the investment in research. Another, where the state of California begins to play a lesser of a role, or at least the Energy Commission plays lesser of a role, and that there's more of an external structure to the program that's much more like other research efforts around the country, I guess, in that PEER, peer community of research tends to be the case. Once upon a time, the Energy Commission was called upon to establish sort of new proposed structures. The internal one was done, the external one wasn't done, or maybe by now it has been done. So I'm going to want to get into that at the next hearing. A discussion on, again, how the money is spent, certain specific areas of awards, areas of research, and what's been successful, what hasn't been successful. We'll have that conversation. The University of California, being such a significant recipient of funding through the PEER program, I want to get into how the UC has done specifically from top to bottom, and again, a further discussion on the various ways to describe ratepayer benefits, not just from a fiscal standpoint, but the energy stuff and innovations, job opportunities, etc. So that's kind of where I'm going to begin the next hearing. Through public comment or any input I get between now and the next hearing, there may be additional areas, but I want to at least outline those for you for the next hearing. Any closing comments for today from any of you?
I'll close by saying thank you, Senator. I think you've given us some good food for thought in some areas that we didn't have answers for, and we will work on some responses, particularly to how we measure PEER going forward and the value of PEER to California ratepayers. I thank you for your oversight and your questions today.
All right. Well, thank you.
Thank you.
Have a good lunch.
Thank you.
We now turn to public comment for today's hearing. Welcome anybody who wishes to come forward and make remarks.
Get out of the way.
Good morning, Chairman, and thanks for the opportunity to comment. I'm Cheryl Carter. I'm co-director of the Energy Program at NRDC. And I wanted to start off by thanking you for having this hearing. This is an area, public interest research and development and demonstration is an area that NRDC thinks is extremely important. It provides the seeds for our future, and it's an area that doesn't get much attention. So we thank you for having these hearings. We believe that long-term sustained research and development, public interest in particular, is essential to developing effective solutions for our energy and environmental challenges, and also to meet the state's energy and global warming goals. I agree with Commissioner Byron that PEER is unique and successful at addressing the issues, research areas, and questions in the public interest. I serve on, right now, the Electric Power Research Institute External Advisory Committee, and while there's great research going on there, they don't fund enough of the type of research that we need focused on the type of solutions that we must have to meet our policy goals here in California and actually for the nation as well. So it does provide unique benefits. NRDC has a definite interest in continuation of the public interest research and development program in California, and ideally an expansion. As Commissioner Byron indicated, energy R&D for both the state and national levels is significantly underfunded. And we need additional research focused towards the public interest. We believe that well-designed organizational structures are essential to get the benefits that we need to get from public interest research and development. And we've seen a lot of benefits from the PEER program, but there's always room for improvement. We do have ideas on ways going forward, and I'm glad to hear that there are going to be additional hearings. And we'll certainly be involved to the extent that we possibly can in design going forward. NRDC has long believed that public interest research and development is essential to having us continue moving forward in meeting our needs as a society. I was involved also in the AB 1890 discussions that developed the PEER program about 10 years ago, and I can say that conditions are definitely different. I think that they're even more pressing now than they were when we established the program, and so we look forward to continued discussion. And again, thank you for broaching this topic.
Thank you. And if NRDC formally would like to submit a letter or a report or of some sort to the committee for consideration as we grapple with this question. Should we or should we not renew the program? If we do, how it may look different / better, we'd welcome some of the specifics.
Great. Appreciate that. Thank you.
I'm Stephanie Pincel. I'm at the UCLA Institute of the Environment, and I have to say, Senator Padilla, you and I share a common passion, and that is Pacoima Beautiful. We were both at the same fundraiser, so very nice to see you in these circumstances, and thank you very much also for holding these hearings, and I believe you will find some replication in my comments with my colleague here at NRDC. The first comment is that public interest energy research will not be replicated by a private entity, because public interest is really the important component of what is done by peer. The private sector's research interest is profit, and that is not always compatible or on par with public benefit and public needs. And I think that as a state, we need to make sure that we ensure that what happens with energy research will accrue to the public benefit as well. Consequently, there is no substitute for public interest research. Secondly, I think we must be very cautious in applying reductionist measures about what public benefit might look like. It's not always a one-to-one ratio. Peer looks out for long-term public benefit, and long-term public benefit may require a certain kind of risk taking that can't be entered into by private entities. And the role of government is to anticipate the future in a way that private entities cannot, because intrinsically they can't take that kind of risk. And benefits can be long-term, that take a long time to amortize, and maybe things like better public health that has more intangible benefits, and it's not a one-to-one ratio. It may also be that better knowledge can be produced by peer programs, better knowledge that can assist in decision making. Now, better knowledge may be used or not used. As we know, in the pressures of public decision making, sometimes the best solution is not the one chosen, but at least we should know what alternatives exist out there to inform decision making, and that can't be monetized very easily. Widgets alone will not suffice either to implement a better energy use future. And so we have to be a little bit careful about just investing in new technologies, because that may not be sufficient in terms of thinking about the future. There may be questions of how these technologies fit together that need a more overarching view than simply investing in the best boiler technology. I have a couple more comments. Please be patient. As my colleague pointed out, the money that is allocated to the peer program for funding is actually relatively paltry compared to the kinds of energy future needs that we anticipate on the horizon. And federal money is not very big either. And so where and how are we going to fund the kind of research that we need to go into the future, a different future that's going to require a lot of changes? So rather than thinking about this peer program as being a lot of money, I think we should look at it as being rather insufficient. And finally, I don't think that we should look at peer money as subsidies for private companies to develop technologies. I think the state and ratepayers have a stake in thinking about things in a broader way. So it's not simply turning the state funding being used to improve private businesses' technologies, but it has a much bigger public interest that we should be looking out for. So I commend you for holding these hearings. I look forward to participating in the next hearings. I think they're going to be extremely interesting and very pertinent, and I will be happy to work with my colleagues to provide additional feedback for you.
Right.
So
thank you very much. Any other public comment for today? Seeing none, we don't have an exact date for the next hearing on this topic, but recognizing that August 31st is the last day of the legislative session, it probably won't be before then, but very soon thereafter. I do hope to set a date in the month of September that we will post or notify publicly through the usual mechanisms. So thank you all very much for being here. Hope you have found this helpful as I have, and we'll see you at the next one.